In 2010, I was in my early 20s, spending countless nights working well past 10 at an ad agency. No matter how efficiently I tried to manage the campaigns I oversaw, the antiquated systems I needed to use made work consistently occur at a glacial pace. Even 10 years later, much of the ad industry continues managing ad buys the same way they always have, slowly and tediously. But Tyler Kelly is looking to change that. As the president of Centro, Tyler wants agencies and marketers to know that there are options to streamline campaign workflow so that employees are working smarter and the organizations employing them are operating more profitably. But accepting change isn't easy when so many advertising organizations have been buying the same way for decades. I talked to Tyler about breaking away from old habits, accepting that change is necessary, attracting new generations of talent to the ad buying industry, and much more. This episode on bringing efficiency to media buying starts right now. Well, Tyler, thanks so much for joining us for another episode of Ad Tech Unfiltered here in our Chicago offices.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start off with just getting a little bit of background on who you are and what you do at Centro.
Great. My name is Tyler Kelly. I'm the president of really revenue and operations at Centro. So my main focus is really on our outbound sales activity, all the way through to operations, onboarding. So this includes departments of sales, media services, and customer success.
So the larger theme for today is going to be about the complications associated with media planning and media buying and why it's so hard. So I'll also share my own story. I used to work at a holding company down the street from here, and I remember doing media planning and buying and sitting in the office until 11 o'clock at night and wondering, what's wrong with me? Why is this taking so long? This is just, I've been here for months, and somehow I'm not able to optimize some processes, and some of it has to do with the fact that there are some clunky aspects to the technology we were leveraging. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, I think, when you look at media buying and how it's changed over the years, and even to back up even a brief description, I think, on Centro and where we've come from to where we are and why do we have such a large services team? Why do we focus on technology? And it really started in the very beginning. I joined the company in 2005. And Sean had always had the dream of how do we create better automation within the digital media landscape. And in 2005, the real challenge was the amount of sites that you had to execute against. At the time, 75% of all ad dollars went to 4 sites: AOL, Google, MSN, and Yahoo. If you fast forward to today, sadly, it's only 2 sites, with Facebook and Google taking the lead share in that duopoly. But what the complexity is continuing to change. So in 2005, when it was all these sites, DSPs and exchanges came on and really helped execute the long tail. Where the complication now is the amount of technology that is out there, just how to piece everything together. And that's everything from you're starting from your DMP, CDP, what are you doing with your MarTech? How does that plug into your ad tech? And then what are you doing from an attribution standpoint all the way through the full loop? But there's optimization technologies, there's attribution technologies. All of these things play into it. Part of the challenge is there's costs associated at all of it, right? So is the cost justifying the end goal? And then how complicated can you make it? Education is a big area of need within this industry. And it's interesting, as we were building the technology and really wanting to be a self-serve ad tech platform for years, we had to fund it. And we funded it through providing managed services to agencies and clients directly. That's really been a very interesting thing for us now, because when we go talk to clients, we're the only ad tech company that I know of our size, that has as large of our services team that we have. We have over 275 people in our services organization. There's just not a lot of companies that combine that. So the real strength that we're seeing is the combination of services and the technology. And I say that because everybody would love to have a SaaS-based platform that is very intuitive, very user-friendly, and you can just get off the ground, run, and move forward. I think the reality is, in the advertising world, all these platforms need a lot of help, right? There's a lot of skill that comes in, and the amount of education within our space, I believe, is lacking. I think we all like to go after the shiny new toy, but we also don't really take the time to learn everything along the route. And we see this because as I talk to agencies, I'm amazed actually throughout the organizations like finance. They might not know dynamic pricing, right? Well, that's a big issue if you don't know how to bill and actualize against it. So I think that's an area that we're really focused in. And the fact that we have so many people in the services side allows us to help scale these organizations. And we really take a lot of pride in training, educating the market, and continue to push that forward. But it's nice that we actually have both sides now to really help change the industry.
A couple of times, Tyler, you mentioned the technology, I'm using air quotes, that people can't see. Can you give us more background on what that technology is, given all the challenges you described?
Our technology is Basis. I probably should have said that earlier. Basis is what we launched in really the beginning of 2018. It's been an amalgamation over the years of really trying to look at the entire buy cycle. And what that is when we talk about media buying, in 2005, Sean and I would always go out and talk about how the fact that we're still using Excel and Outlook to execute all media. Well, that was 2005. It's 2019, and we're still using Excel and Outlook to do all of our media buying. So reality is it's really an automation platform. And the automation platform is really everything from the very beginning, from a governance, standard, taxonomy, getting everything built correctly in the front end, through the RFP process, so you can buy site direct, execute against that, native, video, everything through the platform. Also has a DSP, so you can do real-time bidding and all biddable media within the platform. And then this wraps all the way back around into a business insights tool. So I really talk about it in three main areas, which is that kind of first part, which is the site direct, the vendor directory, communication tool, governance. We have a DSP, and then the business intelligence side of the platform. And that, to me, is the most powerful piece of it, right? Having all data set up in the right way in the beginning and then flows to the back end allows us to scale our company, and we know it will help scale agencies because they're going to have more knowledge about the amount of campaigns, workload metrics, what's working. Can I pull all my KPIs? How do I make sure that all my performance numbers are hitting? And I can pull this in real time. It's really about cutting down the amount of processes, right? And the amount of steps just to get something done. I mean, just from ad tagging alone, the amount of work that you have to do just to get everything set up in your ad server correctly, right? With Basis, it automatically uploads directly into DCM and into Seismic, and it cuts down a tremendous amount of workload in just that area alone.
So I want to jump in there. You've talked about so many things, and I think the thing is, for you specifically, Tyler, because you have been ingrained in the technology for so long, there are people who are still living in 2005, to your point, right? Yeah. Like the usage of Excel to this date, and I think Excel will continue to be embraced because people are honestly afraid of a lot of the things you just described. It sounds like too much. Something I'd like to jump into is how most commonly when people are talking to maybe a salesperson who is coming to approach somebody in a buying position, it's oftentimes much more transactional in nature because in 2005, maybe you're planning for a consideration set list and you meet with a couple of publishers and you already have signed up with an ad server and a couple of other core technologies, and you're doing a much more simplistic process of deciding whether or not you're going to work with a vendor. But right now, everything you're describing isn't a conversation you're going to have with the buyer. So how has that been, going to the right people, finding the right parties who are willing to embrace the conversation that you're looking to have?
It really goes away from having media conversations. I think that's really the difference, right? When a salesperson is used to going out and talking about KPIs and talking about media performance, those are transactional, those are easy to have. Basis is a transformational technology at an enterprise level to help scale your business. So it's going from media conversations to business conversations. And so when we talk to agencies and brands, it's really about how do we elevate their business? How do we create more cost efficiencies? How do we allow for their workforce to be able to handle more campaigns, more revenue, which then scales into a more profitable, healthy agency at the end of the day? But to your point, you have to talk to the right people who are looking at the P&L. They're looking at their workload metrics. They're looking at how do I create a better bottom line on an annualized basis. And that's really where Basis comes in, because it really will help propel an agency to do more with the same amount of people they have now and scale their business in a very profitable way.
In theory, the things you're describing are very attractive. But the reality is that embracing a technology that is going to maybe rework the way that my organization operates makes it a really tall order.
Yes. There's no question. People ask me all the time, like, what's your biggest challenge, or who's almost your biggest competition? And I say this all the time, which is it's the status quo, right? People don't like to change. And it's a lot of heavy lifting. I will say, though, because we do have such a large services organization, we have so many ways to help them scale, move campaigns over, create those efficiencies so they don't have to take on that heavy lifting burden themselves. I think self-serve is a very interesting area, right? When you look at who's doing self-serve and who's not. This is my rough cut of numbers, but I've said this to a lot of people, which is, according to Redbooks, there's about 6,000 agencies in the U.S. About 50% of those are creative agencies, experiential agencies, sports marketing agencies that don't do a lot of media buying, right? So if you cut half of those out, there's 3,000 agencies that do media at scale. Okay. Of that, I'd say about 50% of them probably are doing more than 50 million plus in media buying. So you're looking at 1,500 agencies in the United States that are doing over 50 million. Of those 1,500 agencies, I would say 2/3 of them, so 1,000 of those agencies, do not pull their own levers today. Right? It's really only that 500 subset. So about only 10% of agencies across the country are actually proficient in executing off of a DSP and a self-service platform. And that's why I really come back to education and services, because I do believe that's the future. I think it's a unique selling proposition for an agency to be able to go talk to a client and say, we have the skill set in-house and we're not using a third party. The technologies are out there. There's ways for them to do it. And I think as you're an agency, you need to have that in-house in order to really execute digital media in the right way.
So let's dig deeper into the idea of pulling levers versus not pulling levers, because I think that's where we're distinguishing between clients who decide that they want to embrace something that's self-service or SaaS-oriented versus somebody who's still in the managed service side of things. What have you encountered as far as true readiness versus sometimes thinking you're ready but not actually being ready to embrace that technology?
I definitely think people get ahead of themselves quite a bit, and there is a learning curve. I would say it's not a steep learning curve once you really dive into it. And we know this because when I became president and started working with the entire operations side of the business, we made the decision very early on to cross-train our entire company into the full platform, right? Before we were siloed, right? We'd have a separate programmatic buying team. We had a site direct team. We had search, we had social. And we really wanted to say, hey, the power of basis allows us to do everything. But you had to take a strategist and teach them biddable media and really teach them the DSP components of the platform, which was daunting, right? There were a lot of people who didn't want to do that because at the end of the day, it can be hard. There's a lot of steps in it. But I will tell you on the end result is I think everyone now feels they're closer to their campaigns. They don't have to rely on a third party to understand what went wrong or what went right. They can go in and look in real time. So client communication is that much stronger. There's more confidence in our team now. And it's really because they understand the full landscape. They're not just transacting with a third party. They're actually in there and learning it and doing it. And it's making for better, smarter, tactical strategists across our company. And I know it will resonate the same way to other agencies. And I think if you're not looking at doing that, I think you're going to be in the past. Facebook, Google have set the standard, and I think that's going to be across the entire industry.
You said you feel that it's not too steep of a learning curve as far as embracing the technology and learning about biddable buying, but I think I can agree that it's not necessarily too steep of a learning curve, but at the same time, it is a permanent commitment to continue embracing the new enhancements that are both affecting the tech and new types of ways to do buying. So you talked about education earlier on. What are some of the key ways that people need to be continuously educating themselves so that they don't start having friction with the technology?
One, I think everybody should constantly be learning, I think, in everything that we do. And I think if this is your profession, you should be diving into it. You should be talking to other companies. You should be asking for their help. And there's a lot of programs, not even just with us, but with other companies too, that train on how do you execute against biddable media. I'd say the biggest area might not be the learning curve, it's the time. What we know, and you said it in the very beginning, you'd be at your office till 11 o'clock at night. Did you have the time to go learn something new? Or were you just like, I'm just going to keep using Excel and Outlook because that's what I've done. I can get by And learning something new it's too daunting, right? Or I don't have a campaign that I can learn this off right away. So I'll just keep pushing it off. So it's really about finding that time, I think, in our industry versus the actual learning gap. Because I just see too many agencies that they're just burning. And it's, hey, we have this great automation tool to give you time back. But the first 3 to 6 months is going to be a learning curve. There is going to be time spent in terms of understanding the platform. I will guarantee after 6 months, you're going to be a lot more efficient. You're going to have a lot more time back in your day. But finding that time in the very beginning to learn something is tough. And so you have to make it a priority, right? Change management has to be a priority for your organization, or people just usually do not change. And they're going to keep doing it the way they are, which is why, as an industry, we're still using Excel and Outlook to execute.
I think one thing I had personally experienced was that I didn't know what the resources were that I should turn to, so that when I was making time to educate myself, that I was learning in an efficient way and the most purposeful way possible. So as far as resources, what does Basis offer to enable people to best educate themselves?
Yeah, no, we definitely spend a lot of time in this. First and foremost, we have a great services team, and we've got a great team that would help educate, sit on the phone, have conversations, talk about the industry. Past that, though, we have a certified event. So we have a lot of certified events where we actually bring people into our headquarters, and we do a very immersive 3-day training. And I think that's been very well received. The feedback after them has been very, very great. And that's one way you can find time, because you're blocking it out, right? You're not saying I'm going to block an hour a day and then it falls to the bottom of your to-do sheet every single day. You're actually making sure that you're taking that step to do it. Then there's obviously industry events, right? Ad Exchanger, Programmatic IO, things like that I think you can get a lot of education around these areas as well. But here at Centro, between our certified team, our education team, we have a lot of resources to provide. Plus, we also have a very robust resource library that we can actually send or give you so you guys can really start learning in real time on your own time.
How do you assess and really consult a client on deciding what the right balance is between leveraging maybe a combination of managed service and self-service, or a path to self-service? How do you do that evaluation?
It's really in conversations with the C-level of the agencies of where is the time, what's the education gap, what are they able to do. If someone's already on their own self-serve platform, the learning gap isn't going to be that big, right? So they can make the move very quickly. Yeah. It's the agencies that haven't been doing any self-serve that really need that path to self-service. And I say need because it's almost like it's great when you have somebody sitting next to you that knows it, and it's just a guidepost and there to help. So for agencies that have not done any self-serve buying, I would always suggest to do a path to self-service to where they can have the expertise of somebody here on the platform helping them, guide them, and making sure everything is set up and run correctly at the very beginning.
What is the product life cycle, or however you want to describe the life cycle as it relates to somebody who wants to embrace the technology? Now I need to figure out, okay, I'm on board. I like what you're bringing to the table. I see that there's benefits for my organization. What are my next steps? The
next steps would obviously be really, coming to a certified event, making sure that you are proficient within the platform, making sure that you have a campaign, you have something that you're starting to utilize. We have a lot of people who sign up and like, this is great, but they've already booked all their campaigns for the next 6 months. So it's like, you probably want to wait till that next campaign life cycle and then start fresh, because you want to kind of have everything in the very beginning, and the start-stop can be a little bit difficult. We definitely are here to help, and if it has been booked, we can rebook and we can help you in terms of porting things over and helping you scale on the path to self-service model that we just talked about. But for most agencies, it's very good when you have something or an account, a client that you can start moving over directly.
Now, we've primarily been mentioning Excel as the quote-unquote tool that people have been using for an extended period of time, maybe 20 plus years, essentially as the gold standard. I might be using that almost sarcastically. That's what people have embraced because it's just universally available. There are disparate pieces of technology that cover a component of what Centro brings to the table. And if you really embrace that 1 or 2 or 3 other platforms that cover a portion of what Centro brings to the table, what are the conversations you're having with clients to say it might make more sense for you to shift away and leave some of the disparate components you've been accustomed to in the past?
Right. Yeah. I think really it's just a cost analysis, right? It's cost, it's time analysis, because teaching someone to learn 3 to 4 platforms is more difficult than teaching someone to learn one platform. So if you're having to cobble together 3 to 4 platforms to do what one platform to do, I would argue that alone is very daunting and very difficult. And I think within Basis, especially like data visualization, right, having all your KPIs in one place, all the business intelligence you're going to get definitely help take away a lot of different tools. And so therefore, it's really taking a inventory of what are they using, how does their tech stack actually add up, and then where can we help create efficiencies, cost savings, time savings, all of those things. And those are the conversations I'd love to get into, because I do know there's efficiencies. I do know there's things that they can subtract. They can create more efficiencies. I remember very early on, we were launching one of our early iterations of our product. And I called on who is now our head of operations, April Weeks, at Timberland McLean in Dallas a while back. But I went to her and I said, hey, here's this great tool. And at the time, we were just doing basically an RFP type system. We weren't taking away anything else. And her comment to me is, she's like, listen, my team has to be proficient in 5 different technologies. I don't want to add a 6. But if you can make it 4, that's a great conversation to have. So it's really about taking inventory and how do we get them into less technologies to become more proficient and more, I think, a better buyer and create better performance for their clients.
Sometimes people who are on the other side of the table may not be hearing what you're looking to sell. When somebody is thinking about Centro and they're like, I used to use you as a managed service, I'm really in the point solution game. How do you help people understand that they should be looking at these bigger opportunities as opposed to continuing to obsess over what can you bring to this media plan as opposed to how can you help me solve larger business challenges?
I think a lot of it's on who you talk to. So if I'm talking to a media buyer, they're going to bucket me into a media conversation. And that will probably play on our past, heavy local, networky type managed service that can turn things around very quickly and efficiently. And by the way, there's still a great need for that, and we still have that offering that we can help people scale out their media if they need it, and if they need services, we're happy to do that. Once you get in that conversation, you know who you're talking to, changes the conversation. And so as we talk to more C-level and start talking about the operation sides, talking about the cost savings, talking about how we're looking at the entire digital media execution, that's where we can hopefully start changing perceptions. We also obviously have a lot of case studies. We just did a joint study with Forrester that they talked to independently of us. They talked to 4 of our agencies, and it came back that we can create a total economic impact against their agency of 35%. That's massive, right? So if I'm an agency and I can get 35% either cost efficiencies, I can scale by 35% without adding more heads. I can, even if I'm on an FTE model, how do I maybe charge more for more strategic work because my team isn't in the weeds anymore? And this is verified, obviously, by Forrester, who is a very prominent third-party firm. And so we feel really confident. I didn't know where that study was going to come back. Could have come back at 10%. Would have changed my conversation. But at 35%, you can start really playing this and see real dollars if I'm a C-level right away. And that's really where we're taking the conversation, which is how do we help you recognize that 35%? Because I can say it, but I really need to prove it. And I want to help prove it with you as we move forward.
The conversation of embracing technology that can do many of the things that you're describing and that we've been discussing isn't a brand new conversation, at least not for Centro. So do you feel that the time is more ripe today than it has been historically? And what's changed about the landscape we're in right now?
I actually think, and I know, I would say no, because we had launched earlier platforms that were around automation and workflow. The way that this business has evolved was in 2005, it was scaling out all these smaller sites. 2010 is when you saw DSPs and exchanges at the marketplace. And we were out there talking about automation, but right when programmatic hit. And what happened was everybody jumped onto the programmatic bandwagon because there is efficiencies. It's great. And by the way, agencies were making a very healthy margin off of it. So it was an amazing revenue center for agencies. And so we saw everybody jump on it. I actually think if we launched Basis 3 years ago, it would have been a very difficult conversation because agencies were experiencing good revenue growth and success. I think what's happened because of transparency, because the ANA has shown such a light into marketers on making sure they know where every fee is, those revenue centers at agencies have now become cost centers. And so now we're seeing automation, right? And we've built Basis around the idea of automation from the very beginning. But I don't think people were really embracing it because their revenues were fine. Now that there is this conversation about transparency, automation is what we're talking about all the time. Dentsu actually now has a chief automation officer. You're just starting to see how the market is embracing it. It's not just us talking about it anymore. The market needs to create more efficiencies because marketers, love them or hate them, want more work, they want more data, they want more control, and they want to pay you less. That's a scary thought. So without a technology, those two things can't happen, right? You can't pay people less and ask for more. It just doesn't usually equate right, unless there's a technology to allow you to scale and to be able to do both in a world that we're heading towards.
Tyler, it sounds to me like that people are just so much more receptive to this messaging now and that the market is ripe for these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, and I think, here's the thing, I also believe the workforce is changing in a big way, and we're seeing it in a big way with Gen Z. So the idea of having your job back at their agency world where you were in the office till 11 p.m., we're not seeing Gen Zs want to do that. I don't think anybody ever wanted to do that, but we did it. People did it. The new generations out are used to technologies. They grew up on cell phones. They were very flexible. And so we as a industry, and I think not just our industry, all industries, are going to have to embrace the newer generations. And that means more flexibility, more trust with them. Now, we got to create accountability. And I actually think Basis is really good with that because if I can start managing my workforce against deliverables versus how much time, I think that's a massive thing, right? Then I don't care if you're in the office all day, every day. I do care that you got me everything I needed to get done and that you did your work. But if you did it at 10 to 1 in the morning, do I care? I don't know, right? I think these are areas we still have to really start diving deeper into because I think as an industry, we're changing, we're evolving, we're getting smarter with data and ROI and attribution and all that's great. But we also have to look at our employees and how much can they create? How much output do they have? How do we create new environments, better environments for people to work when they need to work and have a very healthy culture and brand? And so I think with Basis, it allows us to do some of those deliverables, which is exciting for me because I can just see how times are changing in a big way. So I really spend a lot of time thinking about how are we going to continue to scale with newer generations and how can we make Basis even better because it allows more flexibility, right? Because you can take your laptop, your cell phone anywhere and you can log in because it's all cloud-based and you can get your work done.
I agree with that because at least based on many of the things we've been discussing, the concept of continuing to embrace rigid business formalities that don't actually contribute to the bottom line can't be a priority for businesses because if they want to embrace Gen Z or young millennials, they want the best talent, we have to make accommodations is what it comes down to.
Yeah, and it's not just advertising. I mean, it's just, and I've had this conversation because people are like, oh, they leave the office at this time or this. And we want to almost fight and say, you need to stay here later. But I don't think that's the answer, right? You're not going to change how they grew up and what's deeply coded in that person or that generation. So let's adapt. Let's get smarter. Let's use technology to embrace that, but create trust and accountability. And I think if we can solve for that, I think we'll all be healthier businesses.
And we didn't really dive into those aspects of Basis, but I know that as far as workflow efficiencies, one of the nice things is the communication aspect, which has been a part of the technology for a long time. But if you watch a lot of TV commercials these days, there are even digital video spots for Asana or not Workday, but there's a couple of these productivity enhancement communication tools where you work with the team. How can you work with them with some sort of cloud-based computing software or tool? And that's something that's just built into the technology.
Well, it's massive, right? Not only that, turnover is a thing, right? Everything that's built in Basis is saved, locked. You see all communications. So therefore, if I have turnover, maternity leave, paternity leaves, vacations, you can have a team member step right in and pick up right away. versus having to get into their computer, scroll through their Outlook, and try to find all the pieces, which is daunting to say the least. Yeah. So now having that efficiency in there, plus the communication tool you said. So we can have teams sitting in very different markets, but working very collaborative because they're talking in real time through the platform, right? So there's just a lot of those efficiencies. I'm president of a company that's based in Chicago. I live in Dallas, but I feel very connected all the time. I've got all the data. I've got all the capabilities. And granted, with my role, I'm on the road a lot too, but the idea of putting an out of office on doesn't make sense anymore, right? Because I'm always connected. I'm always there.
One interesting insight that I think you can uniquely provide perspective on, based on the fact that you're on the road so often with clients, is talking to clients and sometimes realizing something you historically didn't know because you felt so strongly about the technology, but you're not on the other side, right? You're in a sales role. Right. So have there been occasions, or has there been an occasion that's really been eye-opening for you that has helped change the technology, since we do build the technology in-house?
I think the top of mind was one we just talked about with the flexibility, and could we create more of accountability systems? So as we move forward, I was talking to our head of product yesterday about how do we create those aspects and that accountability. I think a big part of things that we've seen is like visualization. You take it for granted a lot of times on visualizations. And then we were talking to agencies and we finally figured out, oh my gosh, like having a pretty flow chart that we can do in a matter of seconds is massively important. But I don't think we realized that until a lot of market conversations. To be honest, even early in the days when we were building out the workflow, even though DSPs weren't around, we didn't own a DSP. But obviously from market conversations, we were like, we really need to own a DSP because we have to own the entire digital process and that buy process. And so that was heavily influenced from client conversations, right? So I think there's tons of those in the system, in basis, and we're constantly learning. And the larger clients that we have on board obviously help influence this, but also our smaller clients, right? Some of their needs are very impactful, and that we'd love to get on the roadmap and make sure that we're listening and we're hearing what the market really needs. Not what we need, but what the market needs.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that you are anticipating or excited about as we head into 2020?
Personally, I'm very excited. We launched our UK market. I actually was just over there last week. And I think one of the interesting things is all these conversations around automation, workforce, is all the same conversation over there. So I was kind of joking. I'm like, all the same problems we're having and that we're solving for here is a global problem. Like, this isn't just us. This isn't this. So I'm very excited to break open Europe in a bigger way next year. I think next year is an election year. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays within the media industry, especially from a resource allocation. Our unemployment rate's in a really good spot. So we're seeing, obviously, dollars spent. And I think usually when there's a healthier market, you see a lot of creative new ideas. And so I'm always on the lookout. I think where my head's at and where I'm trying to really dive into is the differences between a DMP and a CDP, because your data in is going to be as good as your data out and your return. And so we're seeing DMPs start to lose a lot of their luster because they're all cookie-based. And now with GDPR and the California protection law, we're starting to see people being very nervous of that, which is why the rise of the CDP came on, right? So now how we continue to maintain the relationships with our end user and our clients in a world where we might not be able to see cookies. And so really understanding that and bracing for it and making sure that we're ahead of it and we have a solution for it is something I'm very interested in. And I think every company should be interested in that because it's coming, right? There's no question privacy is going to be a very big topic. I think even on the election circuit, privacy is going to be a big thing. I think as a government or a country, we have to figure it out. If we do piece by piece with California, Massachusetts, and others, it's going to be very daunting if you're a media buyer, right? Because all of a sudden now I have different rules and regulations in every single state would be a nightmare. So I'm hoping we as a industry also come up with, here's what our privacy thoughts are, here's how we're going to move forward, and we dive deeper into that. So those are conversations I'm interested in having and just got to make sure that we stay on top of.
Definitely exciting challenges, but challenges nonetheless, and it's good to hear about leadership that is motivated to identify those things and find solutions. So Tyler, thanks for having this conversation with us about bringing more media efficiency to the buying and planning process.
Awesome. Thank you, Noor.
Thanks again to Tyler Kelly for chatting about bringing efficiency to the media buying and planning process. As a former ad buyer and planner, I recall an endless number of occasions where I wish there was a life raft to help me expedite the speed with which more low consideration tasks were completed. Without question, automated tools and software will transform the way people work in the ad industry and how organizations maintain a competitive edge. I'm Noor Naseer. Thanks for listening to this episode and listening to this first season of AdTech Unfiltered. We have a ton of new and awesome episodes planned for next year, so we're looking forward to sharing them soon. Until then, we'll catch you next time for more AdTech Unfiltered.